Jim Knight, Schools Minister, welcome. Now, looking at your CV, it's not a very typical one for a politician. You're involved in managing arts venues, involved in a travelling theatre company and running a publishing company, and then a very rapid rise into ministerial ranks. And you've been Schools Minister since May 2006, so 2.5 years. That's a pretty long record compared to many others. You hoping, expecting to stay a bit longer?
I'm hugely enjoying being Schools Minister. I'm very happy to have remained in post whilst everything else changes around me.
And I have to ask, running a theatre company, how useful was that as preparation for being in charge of schools?
Well, the funny thing about doing theatre is that it's always got to be all right on the night. So however much chaos there is backstage, out front, it's all got to look perfectly planned and perfectly orderly. And so people who've worked in theatre are generally pretty good at crisis management, which occasionally comes in handy.
Now, you've just had a bit of a change of responsibilities when Lord Adonis left the department, so you've taken on City Academy. So let's perhaps just begin on that. Where do you think we are with City Academies? There's still a sense that it's very mixed fortunes for academies. Some are doing very well, others not so well. Where do you see the programme moving?
Well, the vast majority are doing really well, and when we look at the evaluations and the analysis that we're having come into the department done independently for us, then we see them improving at twice the national average, for example, in terms of GCSE results. So I'm very happy with what actually happens on the ground. I've made no secret of the fact that until I visited an academy, I was sceptical. Because
people were concerned that you weren't quite such an enthusiast as Lord Adonis was.
Well, I'd read, this was 3 years ago, I'd been reading all of the stuff in the media and all the talk about them, whether they were cheating in various ways. Then the first one I visited, I think, was the City of Bristol Academy, and I was bowled over by what a different sort of environment it was to everything I was expecting, and how open and accessible it was. It was local admissions and really transforming things for that community in the south of Bristol. I've since, over the last 2.5 years, been able to visit a whole series of academies, and I've always been massively impressed by what I've seen, and I'm therefore an extremely strong and passionate advocate for them. On the basis that they've got fair admissions, that they're taking in more than their fair share of free school meals pupils, that they're taking in more than their fair share of children with special educational needs, that they are really dealing with some of our most difficult educational challenges and doing a really good job.
Is there still a lot to be done in secondary schools? I mean, after we've just had the Ofsted annual report, which found that 9% of secondary schools were still inadequate, unsatisfactory, and that's quite a tough judgment. Even satisfactory isn't always that wonderful in Ofsted terms. Is there a lot to do, and is the answer to that 9%, is that always becoming a City Academy?
It's not always becoming a City Academy. We've got the National Challenge Trust as an option now. I mean, I think the 9% inadequate figure that came through from the annual report is a justification and a vindication of us having to proceed with the National Challenge, so that we have got strategies to deal with those that are stuck.
And does it mean they're all failing?
No.
Because that was, as you know, there was a lot of outcry amongst head teachers. They felt, some of them in very difficult circumstances were doing a good job, but they felt they were all lumped together in this list of named and shamed schools. I know it wasn't quite like that, but that's how it came across.
We deliberately launched the National Challenge at a school that was below 30%, but was improving very rapidly, the Knights Academy in South London, by no means could anyone regard that as a failing school. So, at the time, we tried to do what we could to position this so that it wasn't that all the schools below 30% were regarded as failing.
How would you characterise them? Are National Challenge schools, are schools that somehow have got to do better or need greater help or got to raise their game? I mean, if not necessarily failing, how would you characterise them?
Well, within what was 638, now probably somewhere around 475, we'll get the final figure when the GCSE results are finally confirmed. But within that, you've got some who are stuck. You've got some who are rapidly improving. They need very little help in order to get above 30%. You've got some that are somewhere between the two, and they need a little bit of support, perhaps targeted support on English and maths, perhaps some more funding for one-to-one tuition.
Now, a lot of people are concerned that identifying those National Challenge schools was a way of actually getting some more schools lined up to become academies, and you have this target of 400 at the moment. Is there a sense that from government that actually that is your favoured solution, that there would be a City Academy where a school is not responding?
Well, the academy isn't going to be the answer in every single circumstance, and some local authorities come to us with other ways that we can see could work in order to lift standards in schools that are stuck, that aren't academies. So we're not ideological about this. It's what works. One of the things that has become very apparent to me over the last 2.5 years is that in England we have some fantastic expertise in education in our schools, and we've not been tapping into that systematically. We've now got several tranches of national leaders in education who are doing just that, bringing their expertise into schools that need their support. So there are all sorts of ways that you can do it. Academies we know work, but there are other things that can work too.
Let's look a little bit about testing and assessment. Now, we had the big announcement a while ago about the ending of the national curriculum tests at age 14. And of course that followed all the problems with the marking of the tests, particularly the tests at age 11. Was it just that the marking system couldn't cope and one lot had to go and you wanted to keep the ones at the end of primary school? What was the reasoning behind it?
No, I mean, if we felt it was just that we couldn't get all the scripts marked accurately, then
which was a problem.
It was a problem, but it's been done before that we've been able to do it all, and I believe that it's possible for a contractor or contractors to do it. You could have split the contract, and then you'd have had you could have had extra capacity in order to be able to do it, if that was the right thing to do for education. And in the end, the decision has to be governed by what's the right educational decision to be made. And so it was made on the basis that we'd had the Key Stage 3 SATs for some time. They were performing a function in driving forward progression in learning through the early years of secondary. But they weren't really being used for parents to judge the performance of secondary schools. In many ways, for us to judge the performance of secondary schools. The National Challenge was an indication that we're focusing on GCSE in respect of that. And so the benefits of the Key Stage 3 SATs were becoming outweighed by the disbenefits. We've asked the expert group to look at how we can drive forward progression in learning in the early years instead of the Key Stage 3 SATs. And I think in the end, alongside a national sample, so that we can, at a national level, know how we're doing midway through secondary, I think that's the right call. Doesn't mean that we should get rid of Key Stage 2 SATs, though.
Okay, but in a word, Key Stage 2 SATs, are they going to be marked okay this year?
I am confident that, and obviously a consequence of getting rid of Key Stage 3 SATs is that it's an easier job to just do the one set. So, I've got confidence about those arrangements.
Let's look at the review that's going on of primary education. Now, some people have said that the remit that you gave to Sir Jim Rose, which precluded any looking at test and assessment, actually really limited that review. What would you say about that?
I think it was really important that after quite some time that we looked at the primary curriculum in the same way that we've been able to look at secondary recently and been able to free up quite a lot of time, trust teachers' professional judgment a lot more in secondary. We needed to be able to look at how we did that in primary, alongside what, from Deering's review on language. We've said that we want 7-year-olds and onwards to be able to study a language. For me, looking at the ICT curriculum, I think that we need to get more of the ICT learning that takes place in secondary into primary, so that children are ready when they start secondary.
It was described as a root and branch review, wasn't it? And yet, can you have a root and branch review if you take away assessment? Because we all know assessment goes entirely with the curriculum. What you teach is going to be governed by how you're going to test.
Yeah, but I think it's right to start with the curriculum and work out what it is that we want to ensure that every pupil has as an entitlement when they go to primary school, what it is that gives the continuity through the key stages and then on into secondary. Then we can think about assessment.
Now, the other big change, obviously, in curriculum and assessment is the new diplomas. They got off to a fairly slow start, really, this year in terms of numbers. What sort of numbers do you think you need to make sure that they really are embedded and therefore they would survive were there to be a change of government?
Well, I suppose I'd summarise by saying sizes and everything. It's the quality that we want to make sure that we've got right from the word go. And as I've visited diploma learning and talked to learners and and teachers. I've been really pleased with the experience that people are having so far in Cheshire and most recently in the Kingswood area of Bristol, where huge enthusiasm for people getting up every morning and coming into school and college and enjoying the learning they're doing, teachers enjoying the style of teaching that they've been able to develop and looking forward to transferring that into some of their other teaching as well. That's very exciting. And I don't really want to get that hung up on numbers because I just want the quality to be right, because then now we're finding Oxford and Cambridge, for example, saying that they want to take on engineering diploma graduates. They've been designed by employers. They want to take people on with these, and they're getting very well engaged in the learning that's taking place. So if it starts a little slowly, then that gives me confidence it will build up into something really powerful by the time the entitlement comes in 2013.
Isn't one of the problems with the diplomas, though, that you're very concerned about them having an academic respectability? You mentioned Oxford and Cambridge, but one result of that is some people say there's not really much real practical, vocational, hands-on learning, which is actually what you need to appeal particularly to those young people who you're going to be requiring to stay on in education and who aren't. Has that area been neglected of the diplomas?
I don't think so. I mean, throughout my 2.5 years being responsible for the diplomas, I've avoided describing them as vocational diplomas, and I think it's a mistake for those people that want to position them as vocational as opposed to academic. I see them as a bridging qualification. They're a bridge both to university, the world of work, but also into vocational learning. And it's important in terms of the additional specialist learning, which is an aspect of the diploma design and structure. That for those people, for example, who want to do a level 2 diploma because they know which sector they think they're interested in, they then decide, oh, actually, I now know as a result of doing my level 2 what occupation I want, so they want to do a level 3 apprenticeship, but they can do some additional specialist learning in order to give them the practical skill that will allow them to be able to go on with confidence into that level 3 apprenticeship. So we're developing the additional specialist learning all the time. But it's really important that people don't think, oh, I'm not sure about these diplomas because they're not practical enough. They should be academic and practical because they are a way into university, they're also a way into work.
Now, finally, we're beginning to hear talk about the next election, rightly or wrongly, but either way, it can't be that far away. What would you hope, whether or not you're a schools minister then, what would you hope that a Labour government would do if it gets a 4th term in terms of schools? What would be your 2 or 3 big things you'd like to see happen?
Well, I want to see us continuing with the school building programme, with more services being located together. We're seeing the start of more all through schools, but children's centres, but also locating some other services on school sites, so that they're more of a gateway for whole communities into learning into some other public services. And for teachers, continuing the investment in them, in their continuous professional development, in their skill, because in the end, without good leadership and good teaching, we really can't progress in education. And I think over the last 10 years, we've shown a really good record in investing in all of those things.
And would you like to be around still as schools minister if you do get that 4th term?
I'd love to carry on having responsibility for what I have at the moment. It's a fantastic job.
Okay, Jim Knight, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.